Hello to my 36 friends who've subscribed to me and now have gotten a red notification at the output of my anger, as well as anyone else who found this video. I wanted to make this because, frankly, this pissed me off. I can handle an argument. In fact, I think debating is pretty fun, with the right people. But my biggest pet peeve is not only to have my words twisted, but to be put in a place where I can't even speak up about my own points. This YouTuber has done that. She's taken screenshots out of context through bad editing, guilt-tripped her whole audience, and low-key is kinda hypocritical. For those of you who don't know the situation, a YouTuber called Overthrow originally called out another YouTuber called Chalupa for a multitude of accusations. These are, but not limited to, offensive jokes, low-quality content, and harassment of an indie comic artist by the name of Willard. If you want to learn more of that, then, ironically, I tell you to go and watch Overthrow's videos. Despite me calling out this one video, the other two are pretty well researched. But we aren't talking about that. Everyone and their grandma understands what Chalupa did was bad, and Willard is an innocent victim. But what we will be talking about is Overthrow's embarrassing declining quality as just a person. I mean, when you have someone who can make a channel 1,000 times your size listen because she was that much in the right, it's disappointing to see the same person live long enough to become the villain. Before I start my rant, I want to make things very clear though for not only Overthrow, if she does watch this video, which hi, hello, but for anyone else who may get confused on what I'm saying. I'll be putting tone tags at the top left corner because I like to be satirical, but I feel like a lot of people won't catch that. So in case someone would think I am making a serious point when I'm only taking the piss out of the situation, I am not. Make sure to check the top left corner. I will be switching between addressing Overthrow with yous and the general audience using third-person pronouns. This isn't anything professional, as you can tell by my horrible mic quality, so I talk how I write. Though I will be playing Overthrow's direct video, I will be editing the comments she pulls so you can actually see what they're saying. Please pause the video to read them, as well as the little text I'll add, so you'll understand a lot of what I'm saying. Since she wants to cherry-pick statements, but not technically cherry-pick, by technically leaving the full comment in. Fuck people with visual disabilities. Hell yeah. Chalupa is not the main focus, nor is Willard's comment panel, as much as Overthrow likes to constantly use them for guilt tripping. Chalupa and Willard both sparked the conversation of essay due to accusation and art respectfully, but that doesn't mean it's an excuse to ignore the conversation has shifted completely. I do not support any harassment that may or has already come to Overthrow. I may crack a few jokes here and there, but once the shits and giggles have shitted and giggled themselves out, we're still people at the end of the day. I'm making my problem known so it can even the playing fields here of a larger YouTuber, but I hate it when that translates to harassment. You can have arguments respectfully. And finally, I'm using a voice changer for reasons very relevant to the month right now. Sorry to sound like Jar, but luckily for you, I don't defend pedophiles, since I don't have a dick to think with. So this is something that appears overall in the video. I just want to bring up this fun little slip-up Overthrow chose to do here. So remember when she said this?
I have defended you in my own DMs from people claiming that you're homophobic for only framing BL webtoons because 2 times is not enough to form a causation.
Well, I agree. That's why the title of this chapter is specifically called Hypocritical, and not Hypocrite, since the latter would mean she consistently contracts herself for her own self-gain. Why am I calling her hypocritical? Well, take a listen.
It is truly disturbing how 250,000 people can support someone so disingenuous and malicious. He used his platform for slander because he knows he has the advantage as a YouTuber 100 times my subscriber count. You know why? Because they slandered people, caused harassment, and now Cheesy is on a power trip.
A YouTuber 100 times subscriber count. Gee, hope that isn't me. Oh, well, maybe it's just me. Surely she wouldn't leave more uncensored names under her wide-reaching audience. Well, fuck. Before anyone thinks I'm reaching real hard on this, take note on how 2 essay victims in her video are censored. She's clearly under the belief that since she has the ability to reach a wide range of people, outing usernames while painting them in a bad light could be damaging. So Why didn't you censor other people's names? Are you trying to say only SA victims deserve to be protected? Or are we just not worth protected because we weren't assaulted? Cause I hate to break it to you, but I was SA when I was in 9th grade. Where's my censor bar? Did I need to declare my vulnerable moment in my childhood in public in order to have it? That's kinda crazy. But Rena, aren't you also being hypocritical by showing these users as well? Oh wow, a running bit for any future arguments. No, my dear misunderstanding listener, because I am not the one with the morals that Overthrow has when it comes to bigger creators and their responsibilities in managing platforms. Nonetheless, using said platform to maliciously take comments out of context through dimming everything else and highlighting one sentence she wants to focus on, not anything else that would require her to actually sit down and be considerate of what people are saying. Like I said, I'm not pissed that my public comment accessible to anyone who viewed her comment section was used in a public way. I'm pissed that it was butchered even though she got ratioed on the comment with my clarifications, and probably was the same with everyone else. I think it's important to note that for someone who is judging people so harshly, that even her can be consistent in her own values. But she has such a small audience, there's no way it can actually affect anyone here. You and everyone else are desensitized to the big numbers blown around here on social media apps. Sure, 6K views looked nothing when her first video had over 100K, but you do still understand regardless of what digits that number has, a K is right after it, meaning 1,000? Meaning up to multiple thousands of people are being persuaded to dislike you or think you're irrational, which goes directly against her morals? If I am honest here, I do not believe it's actually the creator's fault that the audience is immature enough. Isn't harassment off to other people unless the creator explicitly says to do so. But Overthrow clearly is in favor of it being the creator's fault that harassment is being sent to other people. So if that's the case, if any harassment has ever gone to certain individuals, then under her logic, she caused harassment. Which I don't think she would stand for given she's defending a victim of harassment. Didn't you just say something about public comments being used publicly? I did, and that's all I said. A comment being used publicly doesn't translate to do whatever you want to the author of said comment. There was a nuance, especially when a comment is being painted in a malicious way. The whole point is that Overthrow knows exactly how it feels like to have a creator 100 times subscriber count use their platform to respond to them, and then get a bunch of comments being told, OMG, you're so owned. If you morally think that's wrong to do, then don't do it to other people just because it inconveniences your point making. Let's start from the beginning so we all know why this entire thing went from Chalupa's allegations to the subject of SA. Everything will come from Overthrow's video again, cause Chalupa's original video is gone.
Faculties aren't working properly, and he shouldn't be placed in a sexual situation that he cannot legally give consent to.
If you are unaware of the context, it's that they're both drunk, and they chose to get a little frisky in bed. After the friskiness, Billy doesn't remember at all what happened the previous night, but he is fine afterwards. Keynote though, you just listened to Chalupa alleging legal essay, so here is Overthrow proving him wrong legally.
Was even in Chalupa's video. If you had eyes, you would have seen that both Billy and Jeffrey were intoxicated. If you do not have eyes, I will point out the blush and the literal glass of alcohol in Jeffrey's hand. Billy and Jeffrey were both drunk and no one was incapacitated. One of them not remembering what happened the next day does not constitute SA.
Now, first and foremost, I'd like to apologize for saying it was shaky to use legal matters in the argument. This is my reason for why I said so and not an excuse at all. When I watch these videos, it's usually for background noise. So when I heard her argue for legal consent, I was like, the law is stupid. What? I had made a reply to another comment beforehand saying why I understand the opinion that Overthrow and Chalupa should have taken the drama to DMs. Plus, the person who was replying to that original commenter was being rather rude, So that's an awesome reflection on the environment Overthrow creates. But right as I finished the comment, it got to the serious part where Overthrow talks about Lula's potential suicide attempt. Hearing that, I decided to properly wait until the end of the video. But that also meant I didn't have everything word for word from what was stated. Just the cliff notes in my head. Perhaps it's a similar case for other people. I, of course, can't speak on them, but I do get where she's coming from, and I'm sure a lot of other people slip past that fact as well. So, again, sorry for missing what you said. Even though there was a big misunderstanding between me and possibly other people, I don't think that changes how horribly Overthrow chose to handle all of this. She did the right thing in saying why she chose to argue legality, but she did the wrong thing by not understanding why misconception came to be in the first place. Instead, she went back to calling everyone Chalupa fans because I guess anyone who doesn't repeat her exact same talking points has been a magical fan of Chalupa all this time. She also shamed Chalupa, by the way, for trying to discredit her with labels, and she's doing the same thing by making unproven allegations that people are Chalupa fans. Maybe I should have added this to the Hypocritical chapter too. I don't want to repeat myself down the line, so know that this misconception will get elaborated, because the next chapter will be me arguing against her points a clip after another.
This video was made to clear Willer Gray's name. The letter asking about his safety has already been sent to South Korea, so we can only hope to hear back from him. A lot of people are still saying that he depicted SA. These commenters argued for their perception of the word SA compared to how I talked about it after a person has gone missing, because they don't like the fact that I discussed legal SA instead of moral SA. But that video wasn't a second commentary video on Chalupa, it was a response to his response. Did they forget that Chalupa was the one who brought up legal consent, which means he said it was SA because he thought it was SA by law, not because he thought it was SA by moral standards?
He cannot legally give consent.
So why would I bring up morality after he brought up legality? Chalupa implied legal SA, so I proved him wrong to prove that he committed slander, so that he would stop framing Willer, so that other people will stop parroting Chalupa's lies, so that Willer wouldn't feel actively suicidal. I kept reiterating my point because Chalupa and his fans have proven themselves to lose memory of everything I say if I only say it once, but apparently that was an issue as well.
Guilt tripping at the beginning of the video. Awesome. But we'll talk about that later. For now, why would you bring up morality after he brought up legality? Because that's exactly why he and other people, keyword on other, think it was SA. When law comes from morality, it makes sense that people would assume it follows their morals, as they're raised in the culture of those laws. Like I said previously, it is clear that Chalupa assumed the law covered intoxication, since many others agree with those boundaries when it comes to consent, so they assume it's in the law as well. As to further my point, murder is seen as bad when a life is taken for no reason. Because of that, it's natural for some people to assume murdering in self-defense is okay, because you have a reason to do so. These people will then be shocked to find out there are laws for self-defense, and whether or not you have such reasons to use extreme measures. You say later this isn't about us, but we are directly the crowd you are trying to sway in your favor for your friend's mental health. This is about us. You're just so liked that you are making mistakes to make us bothered. If you want to be liked and trusted as a good defense, then you need to be attentive to people and not dismiss them as mindless Chalupa fans. You are slowly creating an echo chamber of people in the name of Willard when it's only you stating the words you said in the previous video of what's gotten you under fire.
What even is moral SA? Because if you're talking about the situation in which one person is significantly more drunk than the other, that is still SA by law. Although the legal barrier to consent is incapacitation in most states, including the one Chalupa is in, some states take different intoxication levels into account. This can't be what the commenters are referring to though, because there's no way to know if one character drank drank more than the other, and that one character was more drunk than the other. You can point out the blush difference in this panel, but what about the next panel? Jeffrey's a lot more flushed in this one than the previous panel. Some might say it's because the alcohol just kicked in, and some might say it's because he likes Billy. But if you say the latter, then Billy could also be this flushed because he likes Jeffrey, not because he's more drunk. Do you see how pointless these arguments are when we don't actually know how drunk these characters are?
Yup, it is a pointless argument. Good thing absolutely no one but you has brought this up. Only one comment you've shown right now talks about the level of intoxication, and even that, it was just to point out that intoxication in general constitutes as SA. This is about to be a recurring theme of making shit up for the sake of hitting ghost she claims are there.
Seems like a lot of people don't realize the fact that Jeff Woods the Killer is a comic. These aren't real people, these are characters. The scene in question isn't recovered clips of footage from a damaged security camera, they're comic panels. But people are assuming that there's context outside of what is shown by the author that constitutes SA.
Damn, straw man. Looks like you're out of a job. I mean, that was a 5-pointer argument dunked right over your head. Show's over, folks. This is all about a fictional piece of work, so real life feelings don't matter. Guess Willer has no reason to harm himself since all he did was create a fictional piece of media. I mean, sheesh. Imagine thinking art imitates life and create discussions such as this. Hey, Overthrow, why did you threaten to sue Chalupa? All he was doing was making fictional works of art. You're acting like it affected real life people or something. If you can't tell, I think it's just fiction, bro. It's the most pop-tarted argument ever to be made. It's such a who asks response when the person is the one who initiated the conversation, or a I don't care when another person is the only one investing so many emotions into it. If you agree with the these aren't real people argument, then this will do nothing to convince you. But just understand that such generalizing statements like that make it so you can't argue that important discussions should be irrelevant. And the only reason why one discussion should continue is because of someone's own ability to be wrong or held accountable. People don't like it when it's pointed out that these statements are double-edged swords that can easily be stabbed back towards them.
In romance stories played out in all kinds of media, there's a flashback to just the sex scene. That's all they show you. Just a few second clip. You don't know anything about that flashback other than the fact that these characters had sex. So are every one of those scenes SA because explicit consent wasn't shown? Don't you just assume it was consensual until further context tells you otherwise?
Dude, she really is just doing a better job at strawmanning than you. I might actually have to fire you. You know, I was about to make fun of how stupid that argument was. Is every scene SA because explicit consent wasn't shown? Because no one was arguing that and instead focusing on the fact intoxication objectively impacts your brain. You know, the decision-making organ. But, as I was writing this and I had an epiphany, yeah, explicit consent is needed. It does have to be shown, whether it's through words or with body language. Overthrow, you do know how consent works, right? Have you generally not watched a lot of M-rated media to know how a sexual scene works? In fact, your logic of don't you just assume it was consensual until further context tells you otherwise is exactly how I got assaulted. My partner at the time assumed I was consenting and made advances towards me. Until I had to make it very clear I was not consenting. Because of that, I had to leave the situation to go cry by myself and to get undiagnosed PTSD because I had so many unprompted flashbacks, it made me depressed and suicidal. Honestly, the idea that consent isn't needed to be explicitly shown as what you're arguing when you say, so are every one of those scenes SA because explicit consent wasn't shown, is not only even more stupid than the initial exaggeration this point was making, but concerning, since we should normalize a lack of explicit consent. I know these statements aren't true, but you are certainly not helping these allegations have any less ammunition. I do not need a guy, gal, or non-binary pal to say yes, this, I am giving sexual consent when their actions show them visibly engaging with sexual activities in the clearest of states. And if you're media literate, you shouldn't need further context to know a scene is showing SA or dubious consent if body language clues are given to you in the moment. Explicit consent is what makes a scene consensual. Why is this up for debate? Out of all the things in this discussion that are shades of gray, this is the most black and white thing. Whether or not people read a sexual scene as essay is irrelevant to the abysmal point Overthrow is making to discredit people's valid opinions and discussions on this, especially those who are a victim of essay that may have involved intoxication, because the focus is on people addressing Overthrow, not what they feel about Willer's comic panel.
Yes, Billy didn't remember what happened the next day, but consensual drunk sex has always been portrayed in media. Someone not remembering what happened the next day has always been portrayed in media. It's common in one-night stands, especially among strangers in hetero-romance media, and it's not considered SA because there would have been no way for one party to know just how drunk the other party was. So it usually ends with one or both parties regretting their decision.
You know what else has always been a popular trope in hetero-romance media and isn't considered a sexual crime? Breaking news! As long as it's popular, it's okay to depict. Also, if drunkenness is an excuse for a crime, since I'm assuming not knowing how drunk the other party is only possible if the observing party is also drunk, then I guess every drunk driver is scot-free of morality. Do you understand how meaningless you make conversation when you dismiss everything by watering it down? White people's food has more nuance than the points you're making.
For example, the girl gets up before the guy and just leaves without saying anything, or the guy thinks the girl slept with him on purpose for money. This trope is so common that I never thought I'd have to explain it. You could say they're stupid for drinking that much in the first place, but people don't go as far as to call that kind of night sexual assault. This trope is not even considered dubious consent because that definition heavily implies that one person manipulated, coerced, or deceived the other into having sex with them. In Willer's comic, there's no way for us to know if either character knew how drunk his partner was, or if either was too drunk to consent in the first place, because the flashback is too short, so all we know is that they both drank alcohol and Billy started the interaction.
Yeah, the trope you just said has nothing that would make it either the woman or the man have anything that limits their brain from proper decision-making skills. That's why this whole thing is a discussion. You almost had it with the money thing. If it was something where the woman wouldn't be there without the money, or if the money wouldn't be there without the woman, then that's a great enough power imbalance to say their decisions will be biased. The definition you showed us to doesn't really heavily imply it's manipulation, coercion, or deception. It just gives you common examples, which means it's the most popular form of dubious consent. If someone made the argument that it's dubious consent because intoxication objectively affects your brain and their qualification for consent is soberness, then genuinely, how do you argue against that? Saying substances affect people differently doesn't prove against the fact that it affects them to begin with, which is the main reason why consent isn't being considered valid. If you can't find a way to disprove someone based on a clearly subjective topic, then instead of acting like everyone in the room is dumb but you just need to agree to disagree. People's version of consent is fluid, and you can never not argue for morality, because that's what it's based off of. If you can't maturely acknowledge that by not putting others down, then maybe not bring it up at all?
Not remembering what happened the next day alone is not a valid reason to claim the existence of SA in a story as a fact. If anything, it can be interpreted as an extremely popular type of scene that many of you have probably seen before in TV shows and were completely fine with, but for some reason are calling it SA now. Is Chalupa morally wrong for saying it's SA? We're talking about the same guy, right? The one that blurred panels say for YouTube, didn't address it, called it a crime, and then implied legal SA. You're questioning whether or not he was moral for bringing up legal consent? By asking this question, you're implying that Willer depicted moral SA. Willer got harassed because people thought he drew SA. It doesn't matter if Chalupa's viewers thought it was moral or legal SA before spreading misinformation.
Hey look, Wah, I made it. I got taken out of context by a YouTuber with more power than me. I don't think this is what Panic at the Disco was singing about, but I made it. No, we are not talking about the same person, because I explicitly stated that I wasn't arguing what he was arguing. So that means I am not questioning whether or not he was wrong for bringing up legal consent, because legality was exactly, and still is exactly, what I played devil's advocate for. Since you can't understand despite me clarifying what I said to you, but you conveniently chose to ignore it like every other comment, is he and other people morally wrong for saying two intoxicated characters having sexual activities isn't consensual at all? The moral in question is not about how he went about that statement, nor is it about how other people went about that statement. When I say moral, I'm asking by the rules of common and basic human emotional intelligence. Is it wrong to say intoxication cannot mean a person can consent? Additionally, I'm not implying Willer showed moral essay, because whether or not its essay is determined by your own personal opinion. Hence why it's a hook, because hooks commonly use rhetorical questions. Do you not know what a rhetorical question is? Or maybe I just like my English classes better than you. Again, I apologize for misunderstanding that Chalupa was talking about legality and sort of slandered your name with that. But with the large number of people now taking this into something subjective, your inconsiderate facts aren't going to do you any good. Choosing to shame people instead of, once again, understanding where they're coming from is why this problem exists. And the fact you doubled down on these statements is baffling. And don't think I didn't notice how the only thing you got out of my comment was the moral essay from my question. You saw the hook of my comment and completely ignored the body that was addressing the problem. That's like seeing a headline and thinking that's all an article has to offer. Please read.
There are actually too many people stating that Willer did in fact depict SA by portraying a morally and legally acceptable trope, and that I am a defender of SA for defending him.
Didn't you get on Chalupa's ass for not being able to take a joke?
Chalupa takes these moments so seriously, saying I took clips out of context to make him look bad, which is so ironic coming from the guy who can't handle me criticizing his humor while claiming I took him too seriously. I was making fun of him, and my viewers knew that. My editing style contains subtle humor, and this particular example is the implication of, haha, he said this specific thing as a joke once, which is funny because it might not be just a joke. Turns out, him and his fans just don't like my editing style. I would repeat the same thing he said when I criticized his humor, something about, if you don't like me, but I didn't pay attention, so let's move on.
This guy literally has Goofy in his name. I don't know about you, but this is a pretty goofy comment. But, of course, humor is subjective. But I don't think it's fair to shame people unable to take your humor while you are over here getting offended by other people's humor. Not saying that you can't. You are in your right to be offended, especially if you're sensitive. I'm a sensitive guy too. I have no shame for that. Just don't act like people can't take a joke, and then when you have the same type of joke thrown back at you, you think it's an allegation. Now, don't get me wrong. I agree when Willer isn't attempting to show anything related to SA, the accusation shouldn't be out there. But similarly to my comment I made earlier, which was conveniently ignored, a person will call a 4-year-old dating an 18-year-old a pedophile, even if an 18-year-old makes him objectively not attracted to a prepubescent child, since you have to be 13 or younger. Hell, the lowest age of consent in the US is 16, and that still would not make him a pedophile according to the diagnosis requirements. When the word is commonly understood to be a person attracted to children and not the clinical requirements, this is where my moral question comes in. I don't think it's good to spread around misinformation when facts are known, but I think it's still in people's right to not be rigid analytic bots and naturally say things based on the humanity in them. If not, then this is how you get loopholes. This is how you can say the child isn't getting taken advantage of because technically the guy isn't a pedophile. This is honestly a hard thing to talk about, because with the game of telephone, saying I feel like this depicts SA can easily become this is SA by the wrong crowd. But at the same time, it's not sensible people's fault if more immature or irrational people take control.
These people pretend to care about Willer, but they don't even know his name. What is this mistake that you speak of? Proving that Chalupa lied again? When did I ever say that SA can't happen if two people are drunk? How entitled do you have to be to try to hold people accountable for things you made up? It's gotten past double standards and beyond stupidity into straight up delusion. Me pointing out the non-existence of SA in a comic and that it's illegal to ruin the reputation of the comic and creator by claiming the existence of SA apparently means that I wouldn't believe SA victims in real life.
It's about to be real ironic to hear her complain about delusions and double standards in a bit. Once again, your mistake was being inconsiderate to a whole bunch of people. You were in the right proving Chalupa wrong legally, and you are also in the right that defamation is also illegal. But legality and morals don't match up with SA like it does with your other correct claims. This is not an accusation, this is just me guessing why people would think so, but I think people assume you believe SA can't happen when two people are drunk is because you were actively disproving an intoxicated sexual scene as SA. So they kind of put 2 and 2 together, but instead of getting 4, they got 5.
Is there a scene of one of the characters reporting the other for SA and the police didn't believe him, and I said I don't believe he got SA'd because it wasn't shown to me? Did Billy or Jeffrey ever come out of the comic into the real world to tell people he was assaulted and that I didn't believe him? If not seeing explicit consent in a story is going to remind you of your trauma, then don't read that story. Willer clearly included this disclaimer for people like him because he wanted the flashback to be super short but didn't want anyone to get the wrong idea.
Remember when I said delusions and double standards are about to become real ironic in a bit? Well, here's half the punchline. Do I really have to argue against a meta fan fiction? Like, what is this? She calls her audience delusional but goes on the most delulu-pilled rant I've ever listened to. If Willer's disappearance and Chalupa making you threaten a lawsuit has generally deteriorated your mental this much, then you seriously need to take a break off the internet. You need to recoup yourself, and then whenever you want to make a response, have some friends or any good support to double check you aren't going crazy with what you're saying. I mean that. Spare our ears from repetition, I'll make it quick. Fiction affecting the real world is why we're having this discussion now. Don't like it, don't read it is stupid. If you don't like the comments made towards your commentary, then to your logic, you shouldn't have read and created a whole ass video. Double-edged sword talking point. Explicit consent is needed to be shown verbally or physically. That's what makes sexual assault assault. The lack of consent. The fact that people can get the wrong idea about a scene, including intoxication, should already be a sign that substances and sexual activities are a divisive subject, and words needed to be said so the artist's intentions could be made clear. For, once again, a way to show non-consent is through previous context and body language, because, you know, show don't tell is kind of a thing in art. Also, another thing I want to point out, despite Overthrow saying this,
if not seeing explicit consent in a story is going to remind you of your trauma, then don't read that story.
She said this earlier.
Don't you just assume it was consensual until further context tells you otherwise?
If we're supposed to naturally assume that consent is given, then wouldn't we need to read further into the comic to find out there wasn't consent given? But if we're uncomfortable with SA, then it's our fault for reading further on to discover it was SA? But even though we could know it was SA because we were supposed to assume it's consensual until stated otherwise? I must say, your brain must be quadruple jointed to do all those mental gymnastics around the inherent paradox you created with your own words.
It doesn't matter how you perceive the word compared to the way I talked about it. I never stated my morals because they don't matter, and neither do yours. This situation is not about us. I was telling Chalupa and his fans that the scene wasn't SA because it wasn't, so that a victim of SA, Willer, doesn't end up dead after being told 1,000 times that he depicted and glorified his own trauma.
Alright, here's the second part of that punchline. The joke is now complete. You can forget about it. This is going to sound super ugly, so I want to preface this in saying that there are a lot of people who are in the wrong in the way they've handled this situation, as it is your fault if you aren't sensitive to an emotionally vulnerable person. Those people are the ones who are absolutely in the wrong, and they do deserve all the criticism thrown at them. But for the other reasonable people, just because a person is suicidal doesn't mean we can't have our opinions on what a scene entails. How can you bring up Willer being an SA victim as if it's an important thing, but disregard others when they say they're SA victims too? Willer shouldn't be the only SA victim that matters in a conversation about SA. That's a double standard. Especially when you're criticizing people, putting down a victim of SA, when you yourself are doing the exact same thing. To play devil's advocate, because once again, this entire argument is kind of devil's advocate. God, I love the devil. Just because it says they're consenting doesn't mean it automatically removes any ambiguity. A simplified example would be how many Eastern-inspired works have very minor coded characters, but they're listed as being above 18. Some people will take the author's word for it because the author does know their reading at best, and if they aren't doing anything weird with the character, then they believe it isn't much of a problem. While some other people believe that being adult is more than just a number, and it's unnecessary to add such minor characteristics if you want to depict an adult. This situation is about us, because you need to clarify to us what Willer is, so statements you don't like aren't being made. That's why when you are being dismissive, rude, and frankly inconsiderate, you make people dislike you more, and therefore driving the focus away from Willer because you're doing such a bad job at helping him. People have to instead address how rigid you are, because you diverted the whole conversation through your stubbornness.
Someone suggested that it's SA, so it's already SA in their heads. Me saying there's no proof of it is doing nothing for them, because to them, missing context means it might be SA, which somehow means it is SA. So they need me to prove that the entire night was not SA, as if I have access to this supposed security footage, instead of proving that there's no evidence of it being SA. I can't think of any other reasoning behind saying something is SA when you don't really know if it is. I think this person worded it best: unproven SA. If it's not proven, you can't claim that it's SA. I mentioned Billy's fictional lore earlier.
The idea that missing context is why people think it's SA is completely a made-up talking point in Overthrow's mind, so I won't be countering it, because again, it's a delusional ramble. We do have context. Two people are drunk, they proceed to do sexual activities. That's why people are upset. Nothing more or less would change that. As much as I agree with the sentiment that if no one has concrete proof it's SA to claim it is, since in someone's opinion isn't really proof enough to claim so, I do have to ask, what would be proven SA? Proven in a court of law? Well, there's tons of people, including me, who didn't have their stories believed, and that's the best option. The other is the fact that their abusers weren't even found guilty. For all on the basis that the law isn't a reliable form of judgment, then what is the metric we can all use to say it is SA? Unfortunately, the only answer I can think of is morality. When we see someone not consenting to an activity, we morally accept that as being bad, therefore becoming SA. That's the only thing that can be consistent enough to apply for future situations, while also being flexible enough to tackle new ones it hasn't faced. Overthrow, I don't think anyone is asking you here to prove whether something is or isn't SA. I think people are asking you to not act like the law, where it's inconsiderate of people's feelings, and to be more like an empathetic human being. A human being who's mature enough to understand why the public may conflate the law with their morality, clear up this misconception, and then defend Willer's work the right way by respecting people's opinion, while also affirming his intentions with his flashback.
In reality, these people are not upset at the contents of the flashback, they're upset at Willer's style of storytelling. They wish Willer showed a longer flashback, one that fully contextualizes the scene in question, that includes explicit consent. And instead of taking out their frustration on media made by companies who do the exact same thing because it's widely accepted, they just claim that an individual depicted or glorified SA and that I'm an SA apologist. People like these who assert their opinion as factual information is why Willer was gaslit and why he became actively suicidal. It's not moral SA or legal SA, it's just not SA. No one is asking you to like the comic, but do not spread misinformation about it just because you don't like it. This isn't about SA in real life or SA at all.
This isn't about SA at all? Damn, I must have gotten confused because you said SA like 50 times now, and about the discussions for people's takes on it. Silly me for assuming this conversation about SA is, about SA. Once again, I'm about to sound ugly as much as I hate to, but no, it's because of Overthrow's fault for being unable to separate her own mistakes from Willer. Willer's work and his situation is not relevant to the discussion at all. It shouldn't be brought up. The sexual panels are simply prompts in the same way I use my 40-year-old and 18-year-old example. This conversation would have happened as long as they were two drunk people making sexual advances. It never needed to be Willow's work, it just so happened to be Willow's work. It's honestly sad that you rather blame Willer than consider that any of this is your own fault. You're the one with this platform. You are the one who's stating all these words you typed out on your own script. Unless there's some behind the scenes knowledge I completely skipped out of, Willer has made no input on this whatsoever. You're the one who was too inconsiderate to understand people's feelings, not Willer. To claim you're his friend while also throwing him under the bus is just unbelievably disappointing. I can't say much. And I am allowed to say that though, because I don't need to be someone's friend in order to have basic empathy for people.
To everyone else who actually cares for Willer and wants to help him, I'd appreciate it if you could help clear his name so that if he comes back, he doesn't have to come back to all these insensitive comments. He's extremely vulnerable, so they will gaslight him.
Remember in the screenshot I said, notice she's using Willer to guilt trip me? Well, here's the part I really wanted to talk about here. When you constantly bring up Willer's situation like this when you intend to clear his name, all you're doing is watering down his situation and making it harder for people to talk about. You create an echo chamber where if anyone else dares to have a differing opinion, you'll go, but the creator could be dead. And people like me will be called assholes because we're not falling for that crap. That's how you'll alienate anyone who wants to support you, and possibly Willer when he's the main one who needs it. This commenter is right. You are inadvertently weaponizing Willer's disappearance against anyone who disagrees. You constantly bring up he's an SA victim when half of us are too, and considering that usually causes mental deterioration, a lot of us understand what it's like to be suicidal and then gaslit that everything that's actually wrong is fine because people don't take SA crimes seriously. This is the most basic form of guilt tripping and is honestly sad to see it being worked on so many people, while again also putting down those with valid reservations about consent being depicted. I again wanted to make it clear that Willer is the most innocent person in all of this, but due to your negligence, you've created a conversation about SA that needs to be addressed properly, or else you'll worsen the entire situation. Stop blaming Willer when you're the one with the YouTube channel making these poor decisions. All of us do care about Willer and wish him the best, but we want you, Overthrow, to have a semblance of accountability.
A lot of people expect crazy, unrealistic problem-solving skills from me while insulting me for not handling a problem correctly. They think that I, as a channel with 1,000 subscribers at the time Willer contacted me, should have privately messaged Chalupa somehow before including Willer's section in my first video on Chalupa and resolved Willer's situation. These people think that I, as an individual, had the power to take down a video on a channel with 250,000 subscribers just by asking the YouTuber to do so. They must live in a utopia by themselves, but unfortunately we don't know how to join. We thought Chalupa would delete the video on Willer's webtoon after public backlash. It happened, and Chalupa did delete the video. We thought me clearing Willer's name publicly will make everyone stop accusing him and his comic of everything they're not. I managed to clear the pedo part, for some people at least, but we didn't expect Chalupa to double down on the SA in a response video and for everyone else to agree.
Wow, I'm really surprised that your insensitivity to SA didn't convince people. But wait. Didn't you just say this isn't about us? Why did your plan sound like it was made to convince us? I wonder. I'm sorry, but a video ranting about people's comments towards SA does not clear Willer's name. It just shows how much you can't take accountability for being unable to understand people, but is trying so hard to appease to them for the sake of Willer. You forced the part about Willer in the end to guilt trip people. It's as simple as that. For only 15 minutes long, this sure felt like a whole hour to go through. So now that we're at the conclusion, what do I want out of all this? Well,
delete the video.
If your goal is to clear up the SA claims, then this ain't it, Chief. First and foremost, please get off the internet temporarily. I mean it. As much as I've been pretty harsh, I am so serious when I say mental health is important when it comes to situations like this. I've been in plenty of, for the lack of the better word, drama that involves someone's life. And when you yourself are emotionally drained, you start to do sloppy mistakes like all of this. I really hope none of this is your true nature, because beforehand, you showed to make pretty good and well-researched videos. Secondly, please stop with all the straw bans. You're arguing semantics at best and minimizing people's feelings at worst, which is super shitty to do. If you don't understand, then try to understand. And if you can't, then recognize when you've reached a disagreeable point. Thirdly, as I said in my passionately worded comment, you should have said it was completely fine for people to read the scene as something sexually dubious or SA in general, but not to spread that around when it isn't certified proof it is being SA, especially when the creator didn't intend for it to be SA. Here is an example, because I love using examples to illustrate my point. I like furries. I wouldn't label myself as one, but I've been in their spaces a good few times to say they're pretty cool. Plus, I just really love animals. I think animals are cute. However, there is, of course, sexual side to the fandom, of which they get really uncomfortably autonomically correct to the animal parts their characters are based off. My reasoning on why it's fine to find furries sexually attractive despite the animal features is because of the human characteristics that are mainly dominant there. As long as there are human parts in the equation, then it's perfectly fine to be sexually attracted to their physical bodies. But if the furry is on 4 legs, lives in the wild, has an animal-accurate dick, and the only thing saving it is the hardness test, then I personally find any physical attraction to be zoophilic. Because if you're sitting here staring at animal-accurate parts, getting turned on by them, then I'm concerned on why you think that is okay. And if you're an artist, I'm even more concerned that you went out of your way to study such anatomy. But despite, in my opinion, am I going to go around and call every furry R34 artist who breaks any, if not all, of my ethical furry grooming requirements a zoophile? Nope. And this is also something that is very much considered a widely popular trope for this community. Because as much as I have my own personal rules and gripes I'm allowed to say out loud, it doesn't mean I have the right to spread such damaging misinformation, especially in a community where pretty frequent, to put it lightly. That's all you have to do, and I think it's a very simple thing. That way, you can both defend Willow from irrational people and include potential supporters because they don't see you as a problematic person to sexual topics anymore.